The camera sweeps across the massive Hunter Association stadium. Reporters spam their cameras as our guy gets called up to the stage. His footsteps echo so loudly you'd think the floor was announcing the main character. He salutes the official and accepts his completion certificate. The official then hands over his E-rank Hunter license. After everything he went through, this moment actually feels worth it. He flashes a proud salute with a smile on his face. He remembers studying twice as hard to make up for his weak E-rank awakening. Bro couldn't level up his stats, so he maxed out his brain instead. Years of studying turned him into an encyclopedia of dungeon monsters. He smiles to himself, believing all that hard work finally paid off. Then the official's face suddenly says, "Yeah, about that." Our protagonist immediately looks confused. The official reveals that his E-rank license is basically worthless. Bro got his license revoked before he even had time to flex it. The official tells him he isn't allowed to work as a registered hunter. Apparently, if your stats are trash, strategy doesn't even make the guest list. The official declares he'll never kill a single monster. And just like that, welcome to his new reality. Back in his room, he sits there looking completely defeated. His mind drifts back to the day he gave up on becoming a hunter 7 years ago. Now he realizes he's about to lose his current job too. He grabs his head, trying not to lose it. He yells in frustration as his favorite defense game crashes and burns. A shutdown notice appears announcing the game's service is ending. Yep, his backup career just rage quit too. He stares at the title screen of Monster vs. Monster. This game somehow became the only thing keeping him afloat. The goal is simple: hire monsters to defend your castle. At first glance, it looks like your average tower defense game. Then the counter systems and monster combos start frying your brain. Turns out if you don't build your monsters properly, they're basically expensive decorations. To make things worse, the success rate is absolutely miserable. And believe it or not, that's not even the worst part. He remembers that dying once wipes out every bit of progress. This game doesn't believe in second chances. It believes in emotional damage. He lets out a tired sigh at the game's horrible reputation. Then he starts roasting the game's completely broken balance. Somehow a tiny goblin casually folds a giant ogre. At that point, even he decides the developer probably enjoys watching people suffer. The game's ridiculous difficulty refuses to cut anyone a break. Leaning back, it's revealed he actually streams this nightmare for a living. He's also one of the few veterans stubborn enough to keep playing it. Another exhausted sigh escapes him. Ironically, this brutal game gave him a fresh start after failing as a hunter. Now he's wondering what comes next once it disappears forever. Suddenly, his live chat starts blowing up. His viewers immediately ask what his next move is. He calmly greets everyone joining the stream. Then chat hits him with the one question he wanted to avoid. A nervous bead of sweat rolls down his face. He awkwardly admits that technically he is a hunter. Chat instantly assumes he's just being modest. Little do they know they're hyping up a guy who can't even enter a dungeon. His viewers praise his successful hunting career. They even joke that this terrible game is just his side hobby. He hesitates for a moment before saying he's still thinking about it. That smile on his face is working overtime trying to hide the truth. Deep down he knows he's nothing more than a failed hunter. He quietly clasps his hands together. Then he announces that today will be the game's final day. If it's going down, he's making sure everyone gets a proper finale. Chat immediately tells him to attempt the ultimate challenge. The game's biggest stage finally takes the spotlight. A gigantic wave of terrifying monsters storms toward the castle. The mission is simple: survive an endless army that's anything but simple. Without wasting another second, he starts typing to begin the challenge. He selects the legendary Wave 700. This is basically the gaming equivalent of volunteering for a funeral. Chat reveals they've donated enough to help strengthen his monsters. Not a single player has ever cleared this wave before. He wipes the sweat off his face but keeps that confident grin alive. If he somehow wins, he'll set a brand new world record. Then again, with the game shutting down, bragging rights won't pay the bills. He clicks the start button. Even he admits he's feeling nervous now. His grip tightens around the mouse. Then he yells at the top of his lungs as the final battle officially begins. A massive impact tears straight through the enemy's front line. Even the goblin archer freezes on the spot. Bro looked like he just realized he queued for the wrong difficulty. An orc lets out a terrified scream as the battle spirals out of control. The level 100 goblin archer gets deleted almost instantly. There goes a unit that probably cost him several therapy sessions. Our protagonist immediately panics as a swarm of blue beasts comes charging in. His level 130 succubus queen fires back with a devastating counterattack. He quickly orders her to lock down the entrance. But the succubus queen suddenly senses something isn't right. When the strongest unit starts getting nervous, you probably should too. A monstrous three-headed beast lets out a terrifying roar. That thing definitely didn't come with the standard DLC. The succubus queen can't believe the beast got this close. She immediately decides to retreat and regroup. Unfortunately, the monster clearly skipped the Let Your Enemy Escape tutorial. A massive explosion shakes the entire battlefield, and just like that, the succubus queen gets sent back to the loading screen. Another one of his high-level units disappears in the chaos. He grits his teeth as reality finally sinks in. Wave 700 isn't playing fair, it's playing personal. The Ogre Tailor falls shortly after. He watches years of grinding vanish before his eyes. At this point, his monster roster is disappearing faster than his hopes and dreams. Another massive explosion swallows the remaining defenses. He finally accepts that this run is over. The game has officially filed a restraining order against his strategy. He checks the battlefield and realizes every unit and building is gone. Only the main castle is still standing. That lonely castle is holding on with the determination of a minimum wage employee. The endless monster horde crashes into the final defense. He quietly wonders if this is really the end. Then the game suddenly says not so fast. A countdown appears as the monsters continue closing in. A blinding light suddenly erupts from the center of the castle. A mysterious figure can be seen sitting upon a throne inside the light. A system message announces he's the first player to ever reach this wave. Our protagonist just stares at the screen completely lost. The system message continues with news of a special reward. A beautiful armored figure with long flowing hair slowly appears. This reveal already has way more budget than the rest of the game. The figure opens their eyes, revealing a glowing crimson gaze. A system announcement echoes across the battlefield. The Sovereign has awakened. The Sovereign calmly steps forward, radiating overwhelming power. Main character energy. Our protagonist is completely shocked because this character was never supposed to be playable. After hundreds of failed runs, the game suddenly decides to unlock its secret protagonist. The Sovereign stands alone before an endless army of monsters. He remembers every failed attempt, yet he's never seen anything like this. The sheer presence of the Sovereign overwhelms the battlefield. At this point, he's convinced the game is making up new rules on the fly. The Sovereign suddenly vanishes in a blinding dash. Our protagonist is left completely speechless. One swing later, a gigantic monster gets cut in half like it forgot to pay its subscription. The Sovereign unleashes a blinding golden slash that tears straight through the giant monsters. The massive beasts explode into a gruesome shower of blood. One swing and an entire army gets hit with the uninstall button. Without slowing down, the Sovereign charges directly into the monster horde. Our protagonist immediately freaks out, convinced that's a terrible idea. Bro forgot the Sovereign isn't trapped in there with the monsters, they're trapped in there with the Sovereign. The glowing sword carves out a massive arc of blazing fire. A gigantic explosion of golden energy swallows the entire battlefield. At this point, even the screen needs a health bar. The remaining monsters freeze in complete shock. The Sovereign lands gracefully surrounded by a swirling aura of power. A close-up reveals the Sovereign's calm, emotionless expression. The ground shatters once again as another devastating strike lands. The Sovereign becomes a blur, cutting through everything in sight. Blink once and you're already on the defeat screen. System messages begin flooding the screen as elite monsters are eliminated. More notifications appear while the relentless assault continues. The kill feed is scrolling faster than a live stream chat. The Sovereign dashes across the battlefield with unbelievable speed. A gigantic golden crescent slices through the remaining enemies. Whole squads are disappearing before they even get to react. A massive list of high-level monsters is erased in an instant. The Sovereign lands in the middle of countless defeated enemies without a single scratch. Bro just soloed the apocalypse and didn't even wrinkle his outfit. Our protagonist can only stare at the screen in complete disbelief. A close-up once again shows the Sovereign's calm profile. The Sovereign plants both feet firmly on the battlefield. Then they calmly reach out toward a glowing golden portal. The Sovereign grips the hilt of the sword, prepared for whatever comes next. Our protagonist can't even process how many monsters were just erased. He's probably wondering if he accidentally enabled developer mode. A towering pillar of golden light erupts from the Sovereign. The radiant energy expands across the battlefield. Looks like the boss monsters just got promoted to tomorrow's obituary. The light completely engulfs every remaining boss monster. Elimination messages begin pouring across the screen non-stop. The game is basically printing death certificates at this point. Our protagonist is stunned that one character wiped them all out alone. Now that's what carrying the entire team looks like. A system message appears congratulating the player. The Sovereign stands victorious atop a mountain of defeated monsters. A system message announces the 700th wave is cleared. The protagonist stares at the screen in absolute shock. He excitedly asks his viewers if they saw the Sovereign. He explains that the supposedly decorative character is completely broken. He looks back at his monitors, wondering if the stream crashed. He frantically tries to move his mouse, but it is completely frozen. A single chat message appears thanking him for awakening the Sovereign. The protagonist realizes the stream is still running. He recognizes that this specific viewer is not a bot. He is stunned because this viewer has been silent for 5 years. The mysterious viewer claims the protagonist awakened their liege from a long slumber. The protagonist is completely confused by the strange message. The viewer declares they can now make a new start together. The protagonist awkwardly smiles and assumes the person is talking nonsense. The viewer pledges their loyalty and looks forward to his leadership. The mysterious viewer instantly leaves the chat, leaving everyone else confused. The protagonist realizes nobody else could see the sovereign except that one person. He sighs and accepts his terrible luck. He prepares to sign off for his final broadcast. A sudden noise makes him look back in confusion. His eyes widen in sheer terror. A massive blue energy vortex violently erupts behind him. The swirling energy rapidly expands and engulfs his entire room. The protagonist screams as the blinding light surrounds him. He falls backward out of his chair in total panic. He has no idea what is suddenly happening. A glowing blue holographic screen materializes in the air. The screen displays a notification about acquiring new skills. The protagonist instantly understands the true meaning of this event. He sweats profusely as he realizes he is experiencing a reawakening. A fleeting thought confirms a singular truth in his mind. He remembers the official declaring his E-rank license completely useless. He recalls the researcher warning him about the dangers of an E-rank dungeon. The researcher mentions that some hunters awaken additional skills later on. It is explained that this rare phenomenon can actually increase a hunter rank. The researcher formally introduces the concept of a reawakening. The protagonist smirks as the pieces of his new reality fall into place. He reflects on a lifetime of being looked down upon by everyone. He realizes a brand new opportunity has finally arrived. He leans over his desk with a look of fierce determination. He firmly grabs his streaming microphone. He begins to announce that this will be his final broadcast. His eyes glow with an intense blue light as a confident grin spreads across his face. He boldly declares his return as a hunter. The morning sun shines through the window as our protagonist opens his status screen. He immediately notices something that makes his heart sink. Yep, his stats are still as broke as yesterday. His strength and agility haven't changed and he still doesn't have a contracted constellation. Then a new prompt suddenly asks if he'd like to check his newly acquired skills. Finally, some good news, or at least that's what he's hoping for. He figures that if he unlocked an overpowered skill, his terrible stats won't matter anymore. Without wasting any time, he accepts the prompt. Please let it be something cooler than punch slightly harder. Two completely unfamiliar skills appear before him. Sovereign's Trade and Sovereign's Conversation are listed on the screen. Those names sound ridiculously important, which is exactly why he's never heard of them. Curious, he decides to activate Sovereign's Trade first. A bright red warning instantly appears in front of him. Congratulations, you've unlocked a skill you can't afford to use. The notification simply says he has insufficient gold. He immediately starts yelling in frustration. Bro really got hit with an in-game paywall in real life. After calming down, he realizes he can't exactly ask a normal hunter about this. Nobody would believe a word he's saying anyway. Then a familiar name suddenly pops into his head. He quickly starts another live stream, hoping that mysterious viewer shows up again. Almost instantly, viewer 1 joins the chat. Either that timing is insane or someone's been camping the stream. He immediately locks the chat so only the two of them can talk. Then he asks if they know anything about reawakenings. After all, these weird skills only appeared after talking to this person. At this point, he's starting to think this viewer is connected to a constellation. The mysterious viewer calmly replies, yes, they do know. He can't help but ask why a constellation would ever choose someone like him. A calm voice responds that their liege personally chose him. Well, that's definitely one way to raise the stakes. The viewer explains that their liege only awakened because of the protagonist. He instantly connects it to clearing wave 700 in the game. So that insane final run wasn't just for a world record after all. The mysterious figure explains that these skills are a gift from the liege. Still confused, he asks about the conditions, especially the whole no gold problem. The hooded figure explains that Sovereign's Conversation requires a bit more time before it can be used, which is a nice way of saying please keep waiting while we explain absolutely nothing. Our protagonist is left wondering why Sovereign's Trade is locked behind a gold requirement. The mysterious figure opens a glowing book and suddenly admits they overlooked one tiny detail. With a casual snap of their fingers, they promise his gold will arrive shortly. Imagine forgetting to pay someone after giving them supernatural powers. The figure disappears in a blinding flash, leaving the chat completely empty. Our protagonist pinches his own cheek to make sure he isn't dreaming. At this point, reality has officially become weirder than the game. He slowly sits back at his desk, convinced a constellation is behind his reawakening. Then a system notification suddenly pops up. Speak of the devil, 50 gold has just been deposited into his account. He immediately activates Sovereign's Trade. A massive list of monsters instantly fills his vision. Hold on, that's literally the hiring menu from his old game. His eyes widen as he recognizes goblins, orcs, and every familiar monster. The interface is exactly the same as the one he spent years staring at. Turns out those thousands of gaming hours weren't a waste after all. He quickly realizes he can actually summon these monsters to fight for him. Checking his balance, he discovers he can only afford a goblin slave. Bro's budget said best I can do is one goblin. Scrolling further down the list, he spots the Sovereign. The hiring cost is so absurd it might as well have been written in another language. Yeah, that's staying in the shopping cart for a while. He He remembers the unbelievable destruction the Sovereign unleashed during Wave 700. Just one summon like that would completely change everything. The only problem is he'd need a mountain of gold first. He remembers that hunters only earn gold by clearing dungeons and killing monsters. That means if he wants to get rich, he'll have to hunt for real. Unfortunately, his stats are still allergic to winning fights. He grimaces knowing even the weakest monster could still flatten him. That leaves him with exactly one option. When your budget is terrible, the Goblin becomes your MVP. He presses the summon button without hesitation. The system confirms that the Goblin slave has officially been hired. A massive blue portal suddenly rips open in the middle of his room. He instinctively shields his eyes as an overwhelming aura pours out. This is way too much aura for something that cost 50 gold. His eyes snap open in complete disbelief as the summoned creature finally reveals itself. Meanwhile, back at the Hunter Association, someone pulls up his profile. Talk about the worst possible timing for background check. The screen displays his empty hunting record, along with the single regeneration skill everyone already wrote him off for having. The clerk double-checks his profile and confirms he's registered as an E-rank solo hunter. She asks if he's certain he wants to take missions alone. Lady's giving him one last chance to rethink today's life choices. She then asks if this will be his very first request. He nods and she pulls up a list of available missions. He carefully scans the list looking for the least suspicious job. Eventually, he points to one specific request and accepts it. The clerk looks genuinely surprised by his choice. She warns him that no backup can be provided in that area. Translation: if things go south, you're on your own. He simply smiles and insists he'll be fine. The clerk lets out a tired sigh. From her perspective, this guy just volunteered to become tomorrow's paperwork. She finishes processing the request and sends the mission details to his phone. He places his thumb on the fingerprint scanner. One scan later, he's officially signed up for danger. The verification completes successfully. He's finally cleared to leave. His very first real hunt is about to begin. A mix of excitement and nervousness fills his chest. This is also the perfect chance to test his mysterious new abilities. Hopefully they work better than his old hunter stats. The scene shifts to a quiet mountain village. His mission is simple: eliminate the goblins terrorizing the residents. He arrives at the village entrance. An elderly man immediately rushes over to greet him. The poor guy looks relieved enough to hug the first hunter he sees. The village chief bows deeply before shaking his hand. He thanks the protagonist for coming all the way to help such a small village. The gratitude is so genuine it's almost painful to watch. The protagonist humbly replies that he's only doing his job. The chief explains they've been trapped in the village for an entire week. The old man still worries about him going after the goblins alone. Our protagonist looks him straight in the eye. For someone with E-rank stats, he's got S-rank confidence. He promises that neither the village nor he himself will be harmed. The chief is so moved that he nearly starts crying. Looks like this old man has already put all his hopes on him. After reassuring everyone, the protagonist heads into the forest. He follows the path where the goblins are usually spotted. So far, nothing but silence. He carefully looks around, searching for any sign of movement. Then strange noises suddenly echo through the trees. Well, that peaceful walk didn't last very long. He immediately turns toward the source of the sound. A lone goblin is casually drinking water nearby. The protagonist stares in confusion at the strange sight. A group of goblins are casually drinking mineral spring water like elderly men. He is completely dumbfounded by their relaxed behavior. He realizes this strange situation is actually perfect for him. He can summon his monster without any worries. He opens his inventory interface. He pulls out a glowing blue summoning orb. He decides to test his new power right now. He kicks the orb forward with all his strength. He throws the orb toward the goblins and shouts the command. The glowing orb flies rapidly through the air. The orb lands directly in front of the goblins. The protagonist crouches in a ready stance, looking confused. The goblins stare at the glowing blue sphere. The goblins suddenly growl and become aggressive. The protagonist is shocked by their immediate hostility. He wonders if he used the summoning method incorrectly. He curses the confusing system mechanics. The goblins charge directly at him with weapons drawn. He realizes it is too late to run away. He decides he has no choice but to fight them alone. He sprints forward to meet the charging monsters. He sees the rest of the horde rushing toward him. He screams in desperation and throws a punch. He engages in a desperate brawl with the goblin horde. A goblin claw inches dangerously close to his face. A blinding flash of golden light suddenly erupts. A system message announces the goblin slave is being summoned. A massive dark figure slashes through the air with terrifying speed. The protagonist stares in absolute shock. He remembers his very first days playing the game. He recalls that his first ever monster was a goblin slave. He was incredibly happy about that first summon. He poured every single rare item he owned into that specific monster. He cleared over 100 waves using only that one unit. He realizes the true identity of this powerful entity. The name of this legendary monster is Gono. Gono stands tall, wearing heavy dark armor with glowing blue eyes. A detailed inventory list of his rank equipment appears on screen. A special perk notification flashes brightly. The perk reveals that the first hired monster retains its original game inventory. The summoned monster raises his massive club and crushes the first goblin in a single swing. Without slowing down, he spins around and cuts through the next one. A devastating slam sends a shockwave ripping across the forest floor. Bro just clocked into work and already started speedrunning the mission. Dark blue flames erupt from his body as the last goblin screams in pure terror. At this point, the goblins are wondering who the real monster is. The summoned monster launches high into the air for the finishing attack. The final goblin panics and bolts for its life. Too bad the escape option expired 5 seconds ago. A system window suddenly announces the activation of a high-rank aerial skill. Glowing wings burst from his boots as lightning surrounds his falling body. Somehow the goblin slave skipped straight to anime protagonist mode. He crashes down like a meteor. A blinding explosion completely engulfs the fleeing goblin. Safe to say HR seriously underestimated this employee. The protagonist can only stare in complete disbelief at the summon's overwhelming strength. The monster happily chirps and walks over to its master. Imagine deleting an entire squad just to ask, "Did I do good?" The protagonist awkwardly pats the little monster on the head. He praises the impressive display of destruction. Positive reinforcement really is the strongest buff. The monster looks up with sparkling eyes, clearly wanting even more praise. The protagonist quickly realizes his summon is desperate for approval. Bro doesn't want a paycheck, he wants compliments. The intense affection leaves the protagonist completely unsettled. Congratulations, you've accidentally adopted an emotionally attached murder machine. A system notification suddenly appears with an affinity meter. It reveals that reaching maximum affection will unlock a brand new skill. Well, looks like emotional support is officially part of the combat strategy. Without hesitation, the protagonist wraps the monster in a big hug. He showers him with non-stop praise and encouragement. Who knew the fastest way to become stronger was handing out compliments? The system confirms the affinity level has increased. Then the protagonist notices something strange about the battlefield. Not a single piece of loot dropped, and that's definitely suspicious. The monster suddenly kneels beside one of the goblin corpses. He starts digging around inside the body. Now that's some next-level looting efficiency. A few glowing blue crystals are pulled from the corpse. The protagonist picks them up and wonders how valuable they actually are. His summon then points behind his own back. A swirling blue portal slowly opens into existence. Looks like this little guy came with built-in inventory space too. A small blue portal opens beside the monster. He casually tosses the mana stones inside. Talk about having a built-in recycling bin. The system immediately converts the mana stones into 30 gold. Our protagonist finally understands how the reward system works. So in real life, monsters drop mana stones and the system handles the exchange rate. Grinning from ear to ear, he pats his summon on the head. The little monster blushes with obvious pride. One head pat later, friendship level up. The affinity meter rises once again. Before he can celebrate any further, the entire forest suddenly starts shaking like someone just cranked the difficulty to max. Flock of birds explodes into the sky in panic. Heavy footsteps echo through the trees with terrifying force. The protagonist immediately tenses up. He wonders what kind of monster could make this much noise. Whatever it is, it's charging in like it owns the forest. Massive trees are smashed aside as something enormous forces its way through. A gigantic shadow falls over both of them. The sun really said my shift's over. A towering ogre carrying an enormous club steps into the clearing. The protagonist's eyes widen in complete shock. That thing has absolutely no business showing up in an E-rank area. He immediately realizes this monster belongs to a much higher threat level. Then he notices something strange. Deep scars and serious wounds cover the ogre's entire body. Even after surviving a brutal fight, this guy still looks like everyone's worst nightmare. From the looks of it, the beast barely survived a recent battle. Unfortunately, barely survived is still terrifying when you're that big. A warning suddenly flashes across the system window. His summon only has 3 minutes left before disappearing. Nothing raises the stakes quite like a countdown timer. For a brief moment, the protagonist considers running away. Every second that passes makes the decision even harder. His summon quietly steps in front of him without hesitation. The little guy's basically saying, "Leave the big ugly one to me." Seeing that resolve, the protagonist makes up his mind. He chooses to trust his summon completely. No turning back now. He shouts the order to finish the fight. The high-rank wing beat skill activates, wrapping the summon in blazing blue energy. Without a moment's hesitation, the summon blasts forward to meet the charging ogre head-on. The ogre swings its massive club with earth-shattering force. Gono slips away at the very last second, leaving only a streak of blue energy behind. That club probably would have turned him into downloadable content. Ogre lets out a furious roar after missing its target. Bro's movement speed is making the ogre question its graphic settings. Blue flames ignite around Gono's body as he prepares to strike back. He drives a devastating punch straight into the ogre's chest. The impact sends a violent shockwave ripping through the air. That wasn't a punch, that was an eviction notice. The ogre's eyes widen in pure disbelief. A massive crater explodes across its chest where the blow landed. Safe to say, internal organs have officially resigned. The giant body is launched backward through the air. It crashes violently across the forest floor. For something that Bigot sure learned how to fly, Gono lands gracefully as the dust slowly settles. The protagonist just stands there completely speechless. Honestly, nobody expected 50 gold to buy this. He finally snaps out of it and runs toward Gono. Grabbing both of his hands, he showers him with praise. Turns out compliments are still his strongest support skill. Gono happily chirps, clearly loving every second of the attention. A system warning suddenly appears. Only 5 seconds remain. Looks like overtime isn't included with the contract. Gono quietly holds out a large, glowing blue mana stone. The countdown drops to just 2 seconds. Even while clocking out, Bro remembered to bring home the paycheck. The protagonist grabs the stone just as Gono begins fading away. A system message confirms the Goblin slave has returned to the castle. See you tomorrow, little MVP. The protagonist remains kneeling, staring at the glowing mana stone. Another notification informs him there's a 24-hour cooldown before Gono can be deployed again. Guess even summoned monsters are protected by labor laws. He studies the massive mana stone resting in his hand. That's when it finally hits him. He actually defeated an ogre. Not bad for a guy everyone said couldn't hunt anything. Curious about the selling system, he decides to test it. He tosses the mana stone into the blue portal. Instant online marketplace, no shipping fees required. The system confirms the sale of a low intermediate grade mana stone. 100 gold is deposited, bringing his total to 130. Then the system drops one last surprise, a bonus reward for selling an ogre's soul for the very first time. A system message announces that the forest has been completely cleared. An additional settlement reward is immediately added to his account. Side quest complete, bonus paycheck unlocked. The system also grants him a premium gacha ticket from the Sovereign's castle. He instantly recognizes the item from the game. This thing was basically every player's favorite source of disappointment. Back then it was used to pull rare equipment. Unfortunately, the success rates were absolutely brutal. The game treated good loot like it owed players money. A glowing treasure chest suddenly appears in his hands. He wonders if the rewards are limited to monsters. A new system notification suddenly appears. It explains that the user can equip the gacha items as well. Now that's a patch note worth reading. The protagonist's eyes widen in surprise. He realizes he can wear the same broken equipment that turned Gono into a menace. Forget pay to win, this is summoned to win. He quietly stares at the ticket, deep in thought. This single item might completely change his future. Still, he decides to save the pull for another time. A gambler who actually knows when to stop, now that's rare. Suddenly loud voices echo throughout the forest. A team of hunters rushes toward the area. Looks like the cleanup crew finally showed up. The team leader orders everyone to keep following the ogre's tracks. The massive footprints lead them straight into the clearing, and what they find definitely wasn't on today's bingo card. The leader suddenly stops in his tracks. He immediately demands to know why everyone else froze. Our protagonist slowly turns toward the approaching group. Nothing awkward about standing next to a giant corpse. The hunters continue forward until the dead beast comes fully into view. A system window identifies the woman as an A-rank guild leader. The protagonist instantly recognizes her as a famous hunter. He quickly realizes this must be the team that was hunting the ogre. Oops, looks like he accidentally stole somebody else's final boss. The guild leader calls out to him. The hunters stop but quietly surround him. Their overwhelming presence makes the atmosphere incredibly tense. Even breathing suddenly feels like it requires permission. The guild leader explains that the ogre was an irregular monster they had been tracking. She asks him directly if he was the one who killed it. Her stare says she's already halfway to writing the incident report. The protagonist immediately worries they are about to accuse him of stealing the hunt. A nervous sweat rolls down his face. Now he just has to figure out how to survive this conversation without starting another battle. The guild members stare at the ogre's massive corpse in complete disbelief. Even with all those injuries, that thing was still a B-rank monster. Imagine showing up late and finding the boss already defeated by one random guy. 3 B-rank hunters couldn't even bring it down. Yet somehow this lone hunter managed to finish the job. Yet nobody's buying the I'm just an E-rank story anymore. The guild immediately assumes he has to be at least A-rank. Yoon-soo-ah steps forward and politely introduces herself. At least someone remembered their manners before the interrogation started. The protagonist introduces himself as Kim Han-ul. Suddenly a golden system message flashes before his eyes. The message states that a constellation has taken interest in him. Yoon-soo-ah notices something feels off about him. He looks so ordinary that it's honestly suspicious. She asks if he really hunted the ogre by himself. Kim Han-ul answers that technically yes, that technically is doing some seriously heavy lifting. She can't help but wonder if he's hiding his true strength. She explains the ogre was originally the prey her team was tracking. She tells him they'll give up all rights to the ogre's body. They'll even handle the paperwork themselves. The The protagonist is completely caught off guard by their generosity. He knows he basically walked away with someone else's kill. Instead of arguing, they're handing him the rewards on a silver platter. Yoon-soo-ah smiles and says she only has one small request. There it is. He knew the free trial was about to end. She slowly holds out her phone. For some reason, the atmosphere suddenly fills with blooming flowers. The scene switched genres so fast it gave everyone whiplash. Blushing slightly, she asks if she can have his phone number. Kim Han-ol completely freezes in embarrassment. Bro came here expecting a lawsuit, not a pickup line. Later, back at the village, the chief repeatedly thanks him for saving everyone. The protagonist asks if there's a place called the Training Monument nearby. The chief points down a narrow path and says the monument is said to bring good luck. Whether it's luck or another hidden quest, he's definitely checking it out. Kim Han-ol heads toward the monument, hoping fate has one more surprise waiting for him. Just then a text message pops up on his phone from Yoon-soo-ah. Looks like the paperwork speedrun is already underway. She updates him on the progress of processing the ogre carcass. He's surprised to see the message came from her personal number. Guess she wasn't kidding about wanting his contact information. Deciding there's no better time, he pulls out the premium gacha ticket. He takes a deep breath and silently prays for at least an A-rank item. Come on, anything but another emotional support goblin. A system prompt asks if he'd like to consume the ticket. Without hesitation, he shouts for it to open. No turning back now, it's gambling time. A blinding golden light bursts out from the treasure chest. His eyes immediately light up, convinced it's an S-rank reward. Then the color suddenly changes from gold to a deep crimson red. Back in his room, he carefully studies the monster hiring list. A confused frown slowly forms across his face. Looks like there are a few hidden rules the tutorial forgot to mention. He realizes he can only recruit monsters he's personally defeated. That finally explains why the Ogre Berserker is unlocked despite being outrageously expensive. The game remembers every victory even if his wallet doesn't. Turning back to the gacha reward, he nearly stops breathing. The item's rarity is listed as unique. Yeah, that red light wasn't being dramatic for no reason. The reward is the Beholder's Glasses. They grant +5 to every single stat along with a special ability. For one piece of gear that's honestly ridiculous. He quickly realizes this single item outclasses several high-grade pieces combined. Then he remembers something incredibly important. These rewards aren't just for summons, players can equip them too. Without wasting another second, he puts on the glasses. An overwhelming surge of power instantly rushes through his entire body. The protagonist opens his status window to check the results. Every single stat has increased by 5 points. Not bad for a pair of glasses. Mine can barely help me find my keys. A brand new skill called Sage's Eye appears beneath his stats. It allows him to inspect an enemy's stats and skills twice each day. Basically, he just unlocked the premium version of Know Your Enemy. He's stunned that the unique item's effects actually boosted his real body. This isn't some game-only bonus anymore. The upgrade followed him straight into real life. He quickly realizes this is exactly the kind of ability he needs. If he can scan monsters before fighting them, he'll stop walking into boss fights with zero information. Knowing an enemy's abilities ahead of time changes everything. Hunting monsters just became a whole lot safer. For once, preparation might actually beat raw strength. Still, one question refuses to leave his mind. Why is he being handed all this ridiculous power for free? Nothing this overpowered ever comes without fine print. Suddenly, a bright red warning flashes across his vision. The system orders him to prepare for an incoming defense. Yeah, there's the fine print. He freezes as warning after warning fills his entire screen. Looking closer, he realizes the interface is identical to Monster vs. Monster. The game didn't disappear, it just changed platforms. A system announcement declares that Monster Wave 701 will begin in 10 minutes. He immediately wonders if this means the castle defense mechanic is now real. Please tell me they're talking about a different castle. A horrifying vision of an endless monster army suddenly appears before him. His face goes pale at the sight of the overwhelming horde. Bro barely survived one ogre, now the game wants an entire invasion. He frantically searches for any option to reject the mission. Instead, he asks the system what happens if he fails. Always read the consequences before clicking accept. The system coldly warns that failure means losing his castle and every ability he's gained. As if that wasn't bad enough, the final warning drops like a meteor. If the defense fails, his entire world will be destroyed. A blue holographic screen suddenly appears before him. It announces that Monster Wave 701 will begin in 10 minutes. Nothing says good morning like an apocalypse with a countdown timer. The protagonist stares at the clock in complete disbelief. Is the system seriously expecting him to stop an entire invasion by himself? Apparently, declining the quest wasn't included as a feature. The interface looks exactly like the defense game he used to stream. He can't understand why a video game suddenly has real-world consequences. The developers really committed to the realism update. The timer drops to 9 minutes and 23 seconds. He lets out a long, exhausted sigh. At this point, overthinking isn't going to stop 60 monsters. He reaches out and touches the holographic screen. With no other choice, he accepts the defense mission. Guess he's officially clocked in as humanity's unpaid security guard. His mind immediately goes back to the game's core mechanics. Victory always depended on careful positioning and strategy. Good thing he spent years playing instead of touching grass. He opens the deployment menu for the Monarch's castle. The available troop list finally appears. Current budget army: 1 Goblin slave, 3 Goblin warriors, and 1 Ogre berserker. He quickly realizes that every monster obtained through mana stones carries over into the defense. That means his real-world hunting is directly building his in-game army. He immediately tries spending his gold to buy more troops instead. The system blocks the purchase because of the current wave restrictions. The game really picked the worst possible time to enforce the rules. Frustrated, he demands information about the incoming enemy force. The system finally reveals the enemy commander. Meet Count Gyller, today's biggest problem. The enemy army consists of Count Gyller leading a dragon tooth squad. 40 wyverns and 20 half-drakes make up a terrifying force of 61 monsters. That's less of a wave and more of a flying extinction event. He knows star rankings represent overwhelming combat power, and with a gap this massive, the odds are basically non-existent. The protagonist stares at the impossible matchup on the screen. His tiny army looks laughably small compared to the enemy force. This isn't a battle, it's a group project where he's doing all the work. The word defeat keeps echoing through his mind. There's no way his current troops can match an army like that. He knows he couldn't beat even one of those monsters by himself, so fighting 61 of them is completely out of the question. His lack of gold makes things even worse. He simply doesn't have enough monsters to build a proper defense. His wallet is somehow weaker than his E-rank stats. Desperate, he searches every menu for a way out. Then a special benefit notification suddenly appears. Finally, the game throws him something besides emotional damage. The system grants him 1 defensive structure and 1 special item. He blinks in confusion at the unexpected gift. It's basically the game saying, here's 2 coupons, good luck saving the world. Those will be the only extra tools he'll get for this defense. Not exactly the shopping spree he was hoping for. He wonders if 2 tiny advantages can really clear wave 701. The challenge still sounds completely insane. Even so, he refuses to give up. A confident grin slowly spreads across his face. That's the smile of someone who's wasted thousands of hours on the same game. He reaches toward the interface without the slightest hesitation. Time to put all that unhealthy playtime to good use. He knows he's played this game longer than almost anyone alive. He calmly begins setting up his defense as the timer continues counting down. Years of experience guide every choice he makes. Turns out touching grass wasn't part of the winning strategy. He carefully plans how to squeeze every bit of value from his tiny army. Every placement matters now. Less than 1 minute remains before the invasion begins. He reviews every available card one final time. Despite everything, he's convinced his strategy can hold. The timer finally reaches 0. No more planning, only surviving. The invasion begins immediately. A massive swarm of wyverns and half-drakes descends upon the castle. A glowing blue barrier suddenly forms around the fortress. The enemy commander calmly watches with his arms crossed. He looks way too confident for someone about to get stalled. The system officially announces the beginning of wave 701. The monsters slam into the barrier with overwhelming force. Sparks explode everywhere, but the shield doesn't budge an inch. Even the enemy commander pauses in surprise. Wave after wave continues crashing against the barrier. Meanwhile, the protagonist quietly smiles to himself. Turns out game knowledge really does beat panic. The castle remains perfectly safe behind the glowing shield. The barrier's durability barely decreases despite the endless assault. 1 damage per hit, that's the kind of math every gamer loves. He knows this barrier is ridiculously overpowered. Of course, there's one huge catch. Nothing this broken comes without a loophole. It can only be equipped if your total army averages 2 stars or lower. In other words, it's designed exclusively for beginners. Congratulations, being weak finally paid off. Golden energy continues swirling around the barrier as the battle rages on. A massive wyvern crashes into the barrier with tremendous force. The system log immediately begins spamming durability loss notifications. His screen's moving faster than a live stream chat during a giveaway. The protagonist quickly realizes the real problem. Each attack only removes 1 durability, but there are way too many enemies. 1 mosquito is harmless, 61,000 bites are a different story. A confident smirk slowly appears across his face. He suddenly remembers an old strategy from his countless hours in the game. Without hesitation, he starts furiously clicking the interface. Each click restores 1 point of barrier durability. Welcome to the world's most stressful cookie clicker. His hand starts screaming in pain from the non-stop clicking. But despite the assault, the barrier refuses to fall. With the defense stabilized, he shifts his attention to offense. A beam of light strikes one of the wyverns and deals exactly 1 damage. Normally, they'd be completely useless against enemies this powerful. They're equipped with Hack and Spoon. The bizarre item lets ranged attacks deal damage regardless of star rank. Every spoon toss deals exactly 1 point of damage. It completely ignores the wyvern's overwhelming defense. Turns out the strongest weapon in the game belongs in a cafeteria. One confused wyvern screeches as a tiny goblin keeps pelting it with a spoon. Imagine being an apex predator getting bullied by cutlery. The protagonist quickly does the math. At this pace, victory will take roughly 60 straight hours. Congratulations, he traded one impossible battle for the world's longest shift. That means his only responsibility is keeping the barrier repaired. As long as the shield survives, eventually the spoons will win. The goblins continue launching spoon after spoon without stopping. Meanwhile, the enemy commander can only watch in growing irritation. Even villains have limits, and apparently this is one of them. The protagonist wipes the sweat from his forehead. He decides it's finally time for a quick drink of water. Seems reasonable after saving the world with mouse clicks. He reaches toward the bottle beside him, but his body suddenly refuses to move. Oh, that's definitely not normal. A system message immediately appears before his eyes. It reveals that while the game is active, every action besides gameplay has been completely restricted. The protagonist stands completely frozen inside his room. No matter how hard he tries, his body refuses to move. His fist tightens in pure frustration. After a few failed attempts, he accepts reality. His finger immediately starts hammering the holographic interface. Every click restores another point of barrier durability. He quickly realizes the horrifying truth. He has to keep clicking like this for 60 straight hours. Meanwhile, his tiny goblins continue fighting the gigantic wyverns. Despite everything, the protagonist refuses to lose hope. Suddenly, a colossal red dragon lets out an earth-shaking roar. The dragon opens its jaws and unleashes an enormous stream of fire. The blazing inferno races directly toward the castle, barbecue mode activated. The blue barrier absorbs every bit of the attack. Not a single flame reaches the castle walls. The warranty on this shield is absolutely insane. The system log floods with durability warnings. Numbers fly across the screen faster than he can read them. Good thing his clicking speed is just as illegal. The protagonist quietly smirks in the darkness. This overwhelming pressure feels strangely familiar. A blinding explosion completely fills the screen. The enemy army refuses to let up for even a second. Still, his finger never stops clicking. 2 hours and 3 minutes slowly crawl by. Only 57 hours and 57 minutes left. He remembers exactly what's at stake if he loses. The destruction of the entire world hangs over every second. Most people would have given up by now, not this guy. His eyes remain locked onto the screen with absolute determination. He declares war against the game itself. Then he challenges the system to find out which one of them will break first. The goblins continue their relentless assault, hurling spoons at the invading monsters. System messages begin confirming that the wyverns and half-drakes are slowly losing health. It's painfully slow, but it's working. Death by 1,000 spoons is somehow a legitimate strategy. The protagonist glances at the timer. A full 12 grueling hours have already passed. That means 48 agonizing hours still remain. This timer is emotionally bullying him at this point. Still, he notices something encouraging. Even 1 point of damage eventually starts adding up. Math has officially joined the protagonist's side. He realizes he actually has a chance. As long as he keeps repairing the barrier, eventually every monster will fall. The slowest victory is still a victory. Suddenly, the system announces that 2 wyverns have been defeated. The enemy count drops from 61 to 59. Sweat pours down the protagonist's face. But for the first time, genuine hope begins replacing despair. He grits his teeth and keeps clicking. No matter how exhausted he feels, he refuses to stop now. After coming this far, quitting isn't even an option anymore. Morning sunlight slowly shines through the window onto his exhausted face. Meanwhile, the battle outside never slows down. The monster count keeps falling. 56, then 51, then 49. Every number feels better than the last. 2 more half-drakes are eliminated. Another wyvern crashes to the ground shortly afterward. The enemy commander silently watches his army disappear. For the first time, concern appears on his face. Another wyvern falls, then 1 last half-drake follows. Only 2 enemies remain. The protagonist gives a weak nod. Victory is finally within reach. Then everything goes wrong. Bright red warning lights suddenly flood the screen. The barrier's durability plummets all the way down to 5. His heart sinks as he realizes what happened. He accidentally nodded off for just a split second. Before he can react, the durability reaches 0. The system announces that the barrier has been completely destroyed. Well, that's about as bad as it gets. Panic instantly takes over. 1 direct hit on the castle means the end of everything. A surviving wyvern immediately dives toward the exposed fortress. Its speed leaves almost no time to react. The protagonist screams in pure despair. The attack looks completely unavoidable. Then out of nowhere, one of his goblin warriors launches itself into the air. The goblin warrior throws itself straight into the diving wyvern. At the very last second, it blocks the fatal attack aimed at the castle. Little bro really said my shift isn't over yet. The protagonist watches in complete shock. His weakest summon just protected the entire kingdom. Never underestimate the employee with the lowest salary. A system message suddenly flashes across the screen. Wave 701 has been successfully cleared. Against all common sense, he actually pulled it off. The protagonist stands there completely frozen. For a few seconds, his brain refuses to process what just happened. Bro's loading screen lasted longer than Windows Update. Then reality finally sinks in. He throws both arms into the air and lets out the loudest scream of victory imaginable. That's 50 hours of stress leaving his body all at once. His knees finally give out beneath him. Turns out adrenaline has an expiration date. The overwhelming exhaustion crashes over him like a truck. He collapses onto the floor and immediately passes out. Honestly, he's earned the nap. Hours later, he slowly opens his eyes. A pounding headache reminds him that he is in fact still alive. Achievement unlocked, survived pure sleep deprivation. He checks the system window. A ridiculously detailed reward screen fills his vision. The enemy commander probably didn't enjoy reading that report. His rewards include wyvern bones, drake scales, and drake hearts. That's one expensive grocery list. He stares at the monster materials in confusion. What exactly is he supposed to do with dragon leftovers in modern society? A new notification suddenly appears. Only 3 conditions remain before Sovereign's conversation can be unlocked. He notices that defending the wave is already marked as complete. Playing continuously for over 50 hours is checked off as well. Turns out unhealthy gaming habits finally paid dividends. That means he's getting closer to speaking with the monarch himself. A system window begins calculating his final reward. Then a blinding light suddenly erupts from the screen. The system really loves making dramatic entrances. The protagonist stares at the glowing display in confusion. Before he can figure it out, the scene shifts back to his apartment. His phone has been sitting silently on the desk the entire time. The screen suddenly lights up. 7 missed calls from Yoon Soo-ah. The story then cuts to the Pungbeak Guild headquarters. A tall man begins questioning the recent events. Yoon Soo-hyuk can't believe an E-rank hunter killed an ogre. He suspects Kim Han-ul either stole the credit or faked the entire thing. Yoon Soo-ah brings up his recent Reawakening, but her brother remains completely unconvinced. Trust issues S-rank edition. His status window appears. He's the S-rank vice guild master. So yeah, this guy isn't exactly easy to argue with. Soo-hyuk insists Reawakenings aren't something that happen every other Tuesday. Just then the office door suddenly swings open. The protagonist rushes inside, bowing repeatedly while apologizing. Showing up after 7 missed calls is definitely one way to make an entrance. He explains that he literally couldn't answer his phone for the past several days. Soo-hyuk's eyes suddenly glow with a terrifying red aura. The pressure alone almost makes the room feel smaller. The protagonist immediately recognizes he's standing in front of an S-rank hunter. Yoon Soo-ah quickly scolds her brother for trying to intimidate their guest. Soo-hyuk casually claims he wasn't doing anything. Sure, and the red murder aura was just decorative. The protagonist finally realizes exactly who Soo-hyuk is. Yoon Soo-ah reassures him that she already explained everything. Relieved, he thanks her for understanding why he disappeared without a word. Soo-ah offers to handle the ogre carcass paperwork for him. She asks whether he'd like to process the payment first or file the association report. Protagonist decides to handle the association report before anything else. At the Hunter Association, a clerk raises an eyebrow. She asks if they're seriously claiming Kim Han-ul defeated the ogre. Soo-ah confidently confirms it herself. She explains there was no chance another hunter interfered. The clerk points out there's no independent evidence proving the kill. Before she can continue, Soo-hyuk quietly glares at her. That glare had enough pressure to count as a boss mechanic. The clerk immediately changes her tone. She explains she trusts the Pungbeak Guild. She just has to follow protocol since an ogre is classified between C and B rank. She says the only way to verify everything is through a mana measurement. A mana meter will determine the protagonist's true rank. Soo-ah suddenly realizes something important. She never actually measured his abilities after his Reawakening. Now she's the one getting nervous. She asks if there's another way to confirm the report, but the protagonist calmly agrees to take the test. Might as well rip the bandage off. Soo-hyuk quietly watches from the side. He's expecting something around D rank at best. His expectations are about to get absolutely demolished. He figures if the kid turns out weak, he'll simply stop wasting his time on him. System confirms no potions, buffs, or equipment are affecting the measurement. Everything will be judged fairly. As the protagonist places his hand on the crystal, he remembers the crushing humiliation of being labeled E-rank 7 years ago. That memory still stings. The system announces the start of the examination for applicant number 208. The crystal immediately begins glowing. Then it keeps glowing and glowing and glowing. Soo-hyuk's expression slowly changes. That's definitely not normal. The crystal suddenly erupts with an intense crimson light. Mana surges through the room with overwhelming force. Well, there go everyone's expectations. The measurement finishes. The system prepares to announce the final result. For a brief second, the entire room falls silent. Nobody even dares to breathe. Then the result flashes across the screen. S rank. The room is instantly thrown into complete shock. Meanwhile, Kim Han-ul simply stands there with the calmest smile imaginable. Bro really went from E-rank disappointment to surprise final boss in one scan. Before we continue, if you're enjoying the video, please take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe. Your support means a lot and helps me keep bringing you more awesome Manhwa recap. Every like, comment, and subscription motivates me to create even more videos for you.